We're talking about the Utah Jazz, previewing the season, bust sleepers, breakouts, decline players, all that stuff. We're putting someone under the lens, and that person is not Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I never made it as a wise man. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Game time. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So give it a thumb and a double bang and a comment. Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl entries are up and available. They are linked in the description on the audio side. They are linked in the description on YouTube. Rules are there. Entry form is there. You can enter 3 different leagues, Roto, head-to-head, and points. You can enter all of those if that is what you choose. They all have a very similar structure to what we did last season. That is all discussed in the rules. The invites will begin to go out at the end of this week. So don't be worried about that. That is when they will go out. Drafts will begin on the 2nd of October, assuming your league is full, and your draft order won't be set until I send you an email to tell you your draft order is set. So all of those, they're the basic questions that people are having. These are slow drafts. They're $50 entry, 12 teams per division, probably 720 head-to-head category league spots, 360 points maybe, 120 roto, I'm guessing. We'll see how we go. Put your preferences in that entry form as to which league you want entry into. And I think we'll end up having a good time. So check out those entry forms, which are linked in the descriptions, and get involved in. We have thousands of people watching these shows. I want so many people in. These are, I believe, some of the best leagues that are out there. Really strong competition, good drafts, good prizes in the end as well. Big fields. Enjoyable stuff for categories and for points leagues. All right. We're here talking Utah Jazz. We're talking fantasy preview. And in between me recording my Wizards season preview that went out earlier today and the Utah Jazz season preview, which is going out now, ESPN has made something. They have woken up. There's been something that has dropped. They have updated their points league rankings. Category leagues hasn't happened yet. Now, that might happen by the time I'm recording this also, but they haven't updated that yet. But they have updated their points league rankings. So when I'm talking about ESPN Points League rankings in this video, it is based off the updated list, which dropped, what's the date today? The 17th of September, US time. So they did 35 days from the start of the season. We got a first list of ESPN Points League rankings. So it's up, it's ready to go. There you go. Their projections are also out as well. Take whatever you want out of that, but they're up too. All right. So we're talking Utah Jazz. And yesterday we talked... Well, not yesterday, earlier today we talked Washington Wizards, and we said about their starting lineup having some confusing parts to it, and that's exactly the same here with this Jazz team. With the Jazz team, much like with Washington, there are 2 players that I feel very confident are going to lock in as starters. I think Lauri Markkanen, there is zero doubt that Lauri Markkanen is starting on this team. And I think that there is 99.9% chance that Keyonte George, the speaker, is starting for this team. After that, I'm not really sure. I think that Collin Sexton will start. He started down the stretch from about halfway in the season, really, and Jordan Clarkson came off the bench. But Clarkson could start over Sexton. What if they get wild and start Bryce Sensabaugh? What if they start Collier and George together? I don't think they will, but they could. Very outside chance. I think Taylor Hendricks will start. But they also might not. What if they start Cody Williams at the 3, Lauri Markkanen at the 4? Walker Kessler at the 5. But what if Walker Kessler doesn't start at the 5? What if John Collins is the 5? What if John Collins is the 4 and Kessler's the 5 and Markkanen's the 3? So I've got those 5 names there. I think it's going to be George, Sexton, Markkanen, Hendricks, and Kessler. Then there is Collins. Then there is Clarkson. Then there is Williams. I think they are the 8 candidates to take those, let's say 5 spots overall, but that we know that Markkanen and George are going to lock in. So that leads to a bunch of uncertainty. Plus, and we're going to talk about this later when we talk rotation risks, is this just going to be completely different all through the season? They could make moves. They could throw fake injuries out there February the 20th. Distinctly possible. We've seen it for 2 straight years. And that is what is going to make this team end up being a team that's got value, but also a team that's going to be a pretty significant mess, I think, overall. That was the wrong one. I shouldn't have hit that one because we aren't quite up to doing overvalued players. We're actually going to do undervalued players to begin with. I could have just played that off and said, Josh, yeah, we're doing over first. But yeah, I didn't. So cool. Let's talk about some of the undervalued guys. And again, it's all relative, isn't it? Well, yeah, it is. I know it is. What am I saying? It is all relative. Some of the undervalued players that we've got here. I will start with Collin Sexton with the big caveat that if Sexton doesn't start, then maybe he's not undervalued. But at the moment, I think across multiple formats and multiple platforms, he's undervalued, Sexo. He's got an ADP and a rank of Yahoo at 121 and 118. I think he's a top 100 guy. ESPN's got his ADP at 117 and his category rank at 96. I think he's better than that. His Fantrax ADP is 102. I also think he's better than that. For points leagues, Yahoo's got him, well, obviously the same thing, ADP 121 and rank 118. I think he's better than that. ESPN points rank is probably okay for him, but his ADP still sits at 117, and that's where when we talk about relativity and the value is dependent on where you're playing and what format you're playing. But Sexton played only 27 minutes a game last season and averaged 19 points with 5 assists and shot 49 and 86. He only hit 1.6 threes, but what if he plays 31 minutes? And he might not. But honestly, he played 27 minutes. He had 26 usage. And those numbers right there are probably good enough to be around 100th anyway. So there's almost no downside unless he's traded to a team plays a 22-minute-a-night bench role. Or they decide to just blow things up and him and Clarkson get 20 minutes a night each coming off the bench as they prioritize Collier and George and tank from October 1st versus March 1st, which they've done in previous years. All of this, where things currently sit, is unknown. I don't know what they're going to do. We know sort of the pattern of what they've done and what the direction is, but they changed their starting lineup up multiple times last season, and Sexton did become really, really valuable. It just took a little bit of time to get there. Walker Kessler's another one who's an interesting player because he was, I say by all accounts, not by all accounts, by common sense, he was disappointing last season, Kessler. And the only one that I really think the value sort of sits there for him is his currently Yahoo rank is 111. I think his ESPN ranks and ADPs and his Fantrax ADP and his Yahoo ADP is all pretty relatively reasonable. And again, I talked about this on the Wizards show when I'm talking about the ADPs or ranks. I don't want someone to go, well, I think he's 80th and his rank is 85th. Man, what a value. That's garbage. It's not real value. It's small. It's nothing. Well, I'm looking for like 20 spots, 25 spots, more to really provide value. Kessler last season, massive disappointment. Now, I was off Kessler in comparison to most, but not this far. I didn't expect that he was coming in and playing 23 minutes a night, which he did. And he had a Tom Thibodeau-esque 12% usage. He averaged 8 and 7.5 boards in those 23 minutes with 2.4 blocks. His block rate was basically the same as what it was as a rookie. His field goal percentage, it's 65 is still good, but we talk about this all the time, is that you can be excellent, top of a category, and then if you drop down to be still very good, it impacts what your value is. So he was like 70 down to 65 or 68 down to 65 or whatever it is. And that goes from the best to very good. And it's still very good. And he's bad at free throws and he never gets an assist and he never gets a steal. And I say never gets an assist. The man averaged under 1 per game in 23 minutes. And maybe he gets the lofty target of 1.2 if he plays 28 minutes. I don't know whether he starts at center. Apparently there was interest in him being traded, whether that was the Jazz pushing that or a team like the Knicks pushing to get him. I don't know. But I'd be pretty staggered if Kessler only plays 23 minutes a night again. He could. Maybe they just think he just can't do enough in other areas. That's possible. But I do think that there's still a level of undervaluedness with him. We are going to talk more about Keyonte George later in the show. He is going to be the under-the-lens subject for the Utah Jazz. But we talk about him here again because I do think that there are some undervaluedness with him. Some undervalued things. He's ranked at 124 on Yahoo. I think that you probably want to go a little bit higher than that, understanding that we are looking more at head-to-head leagues versus roto leagues. This is for categories. His ESPN category ADP or his overall ADP is 136. I think that's value. His rank at 233 is obviously like there's probably a level of clinical insanity in having him that low. That makes no sense. For points leagues, his ADP is on ESPN the same, 136, and their rankings that came out today have him at 179, which is crazy. That again suggests that you do not draft him in 10 or 12 or 14 team leagues, and I can assure you that that's nonsense. Right? He remains, obviously, based on those numbers, Keyonte George is remaining undervalued. Now, George had real struggles last season. We're going to dig into more of his stuff later. But he, like Collin Sexton, he played 27 minutes. There's no way he's playing 27 minutes this season. That is going up. He's 21, he's 6'4". Maybe he plays point guard, maybe he doesn't. And I expect as a second-year player, 39% from the field goes up. And we'll talk more about that also. Great free throws. Assists need some work. Steals were dreadful. This is Anthony Simons level. 0.5 steals, 0.1 blocks. Surely he's not that bad. There is no way to go but up from here. And he will go up from here. And some of those numbers just are foolishly low in terms of where they're currently positioned rankings-wise. And there is another guy that I think is undervalued on sites for the Utah Jazz, and that's Taylor Hendricks. Hendricks is ranked on Yahoo. His ranking is 311. Like, okay. On ESPN, his category rank is 258. Yep, sure, no worries. His points league rank on Yahoo, it's the same as 311. And his ESPN updated points rank is 184. Okay. I don't know that Taylor Hendricks is going to start. I think he will, but I don't know. I know that there is interesting fantasy upside with him. He's only 21. He played 21 minutes a night last season and very Walker Kessler-ish 13% usage. He averaged 7 and 5 with 0.8 blocks in 21 minutes. He shot 45 and 79. He hit 1.3 threes. Could he go 12 and 8, 2 threes, 1.5 blocks? Yeah. It definitely doesn't deserve to be in the 200s or the 300s. So there is some value, I think, in Taylor Hendricks this season. But again, what if he plays only 20 minutes a night as a reserve? It would be stupid if you were the Jazz, but who knows? Maybe they do want to keep prioritizing John Collins. And I know that someone will sit on here and they do this with every team. They'll say they're going to play Collins because they want to showcase him for a trade. This is not a real thing. Guys, I cannot stress to you enough how much this is not a real thing. Teams have seen John Collins for years and years and years, and he has been tried to be traded from the Hawks for multiple years. He tried to be traded from the Jazz last season as well, and teams know who John Collins is. They don't watch a 10-game sample where John Collins has 17 and 8 because they give him the ball and move him out of the way and go, oh my God, John Collins, he's the missing piece. No one's ever told me about this John Collins guy. He's unbelievable. We have to get him. No one does that. I'd love to see one situation where this trade showcase idea actually happened. Maybe, I'm sure there's going to be someone pulled out, well, this actually happened and that fooled this team. And this is not, I'm excluding the times when Doc Rivers was a GM because, it doesn't happen. It's this idea that we think, because some of us might have this, I don't want to be too offensive, but a goldfish brain of like, we saw the one game. That means he's awesome every single game. And therefore, we have to use that as the extrapolation for everything. But it just doesn't happen. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to phrase that any further. But we'll come back in a sec to talk about some overvalued players. And that might include John Collins. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. We've spoken at length about FanDuel on this show because, of course, they are America's not number 2. Absolutely not. They are America's number 1 sportsbook. And now until September the 22nd, you've got a great deal from FanDuel. All FanDuel customers, if you place a $5 bet, you get a 3-week free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket thanks to YouTube and YouTube TV. What a great deal. Free NFL Sunday Ticket, 3 weeks, unbelievable stuff. So, easy thing to do. You got your YouTube base plan, YouTube TV base plan. You get your Google account. You got your current form of payment linked there. Of course, you can cancel at any point. And that means you can watch every Sunday afternoon regular season out-of-market game on that free trial. What an unbelievably good offer. So go to FanDuel.com right now and download America's number 1 sportsbook and go to FanDuel.com right now to check it out. I think I just said that. Don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, now, what about on the overvalued side? We just went into talking about the big fella, the Baptist, Johnson Collins. So, is he an overvalued player? Of course he is. Collins started out the season really poorly. So many whispers about them trying to move off of John Collins, which I do believe was real. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I do believe that them trying to trade John Collins was real. And they made a change. They moved Collins away from Kessler. They started John at the 5. And his numbers were better. But I feel like some of the rankings at the moment are reflecting what happened in that 40-game stretch without maybe reflecting the reality of who Collins is. Because at the moment, he's ranked at 93 on Yahoo, which for category leagues is just too high. On ESPN, he's ranked at 87 for category leagues. No thank you. Absolutely no way. And on Fantrax, his ADP sits at 102, which is just not interesting for me at all. And then on points leagues, Yahoo's got him ranked 93 as well. And I just don't get it. Last season, Collins played 28 minutes a night with 19 usage. He averaged 15 and 8. They're pretty good numbers. 0.9 blocks is not ideal, but 53 and 80 are good percentages. Of course, low volume threes, low assists, low steals. We know what that is. But my thing is that I don't think that Collins is playing 28 minutes a night this season. If you have a different opinion to that, that is totally cool. That means you have more interest in John Collins. But I don't think he is. Hendricks, Markkanen, Kessler. Surely Collins isn't prioritized. Not that he's benched and never playing, but he's not prioritized over those guys, surely. But who knows? They also brought in Drew Eubanks. They also drafted Kyle Filipowski. It feels like they're setting the table for yes, one of these centers is moving somewhere. And I'm just not interested in John, especially if I'm burning ranked 93. What's that, an 8th round pick? I've still got 2 starters to pick after that. No thanks. That is, to me, is not a good use of resources. That doesn't make any real sense to me whatsoever. The other one who sits in here as, I think, an overvalued player is the man on the street himself, Mr. Utah, Jordan Clarkson, JordanClarkson. Why? Clarkson was terrible last season. His numbers and his shooting was really bad. And he is a quite, I'll say good player is not the right word, but I guess he's good. But he's important to Utah. He likes being in Utah. But you'd have to think he's a huge risk of being traded. His Yahoo ADP sits at 138 and his rank at 136. And in category leagues, I don't even think I want to take him there. His ESPN ADP at 120 is definitely too high. And in points, again, his ESPN ADP at 120 is too high. You're talking about, in a 12-team format, that's maybe a starter. Clarkson played 31 minutes a night last season with 25 usage. He shot 41 from the field and under 30 from 3. And his free throws are really good. And the 5 assists are strong. 17 points is great, but no defensive stats, no rebounds, low volume threes. And again, when we're talking with Collins, this man is 32 years of age. Don't know if he's going to stay on the team. Not sure he's getting prioritized with Collier, George, and Sexton all still there, and Sensabaugh. Will he play 31 minutes? I highly, highly doubt that. So to me, there's just not really very much interest whatsoever in drafting Jordan Clarkson. He might be a guy that we stream in at certain points, but in terms of a prioritization in a draft, no thank you. Let's take a look at some guys who are breakout candidates. The definition of this is always going to be different. It's always going to change. You're going to have different ideas. It's just like guys who I think are going to take big steps up, become more important players in the fantasy landscape or even in the real NBA landscape. And 2 of them we've talked about already. I've got Keyonte George taking a big step up. I think Taylor Hendricks has a chance to establish as a 26-minute-a-night player minimum, maybe more. Develop into you've got him in the Western Conference and Noah Clowney in the Eastern Conference who have very similar sort of game and stat profiles with opportunities on bad teams. So I'm interested to see how that both goes. The other guy who could break out, not as confident in him, is Bryce Sensabaugh, who played minutes down the stretch, actually played more minutes than you think, 18 minutes a night and 19 usage, and the shooting numbers were rough, 39 from the field. He didn't generate much with defensive stats. He averaged 7.5 points and 1.1 threes, and he does have some sort of bung knee problems, which is not ideal. But when we talk about, do they move Sexton? Do they move Clarkson? Can they play smaller with Sensabaugh at the 3? He is a scorer, and he's got size. He's 6'5", 6'6". He can play the 3, the 2. His defense is atrocious. His passing is not ideal. But he's got some scoring ability. He's got some scoring volume. Think scoring ability and volume as a very, 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 very light and a Zempic level light Cam Thomas. That's the sort of player he is, who actually has more of a proclivity for shooting threes than what Thomas has. So this is deeper league stuff for Sensabaugh. but he's not someone to completely discount. They started to use him down the stretch last season, and there were some positives. Wasn't all positives, but some positives were there for Bryce in those games. We've got more stuff to talk about in a sec, but today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. You are looking for tickets to events. You love events. You want to go to them. You want to make it an easy, painless process. Well, Game Time is here to help you with that. They're always chucking new features at us, and the new one they got now is Game Time Picks, where it sifts through all the different tickets to the event that you want to go to, finds the best ones algorithmically, and pops them up the top, highlights them, and shows you, hey, this is where the good deals are. And you go and pick them. Okay, it's simple stuff. You don't have to worry about guessing. Is this good? Is this bad? Like, what is it? Well, Game Time will just highlight those for you because they want you to have a good experience, obviously. It's easy to sit there and go, well, wouldn't Game Time want you to just pay more money? But you have a bad experience, you're never going back. Repeat customers is what everybody wants. And when they provide you with that great service and great options and all that stuff, that is how you love what you get. And Game Time's got all the different things, the views from your seat, the all-in pricing, which you can toggle on in that app, and you go in there and you can change. Do I see the full price right on the ticket right there, which you don't always get that option. The views from your seat are there as well. Just so many great ways to be able to experience getting tickets to go to fun live events. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So what time is it for us now? We've talked busts or undervalueds and overvalueds and breakout candidates. Now let's have a look. Let's have a look at some rotation risk. Where are the risks? Where do we have to worry about when we're projecting this team out, when we're making our draft selections? And there's obviously quite a few with a team like this. Is the late season tank is the big one. And there are two teams that have unabashedly done this for 2 straight years for a long period of time, Utah and Portland. And they are in prime position to do it again. Portland is going to be the worst team in the Western Conference, and Utah's going to be very close to it. So they could even push earlier and earlier in terms of this tank, that the late season tank becomes a mid-season tank. The risk we have is that do they just honestly believe that Walker Kessler is a backup and play him 22 minutes a night? I think we'll get more from him, but I don't know. What if they decide that Lauri Markkanen isn't playing the 3 and now he plays the 4? Then where the hell does Taylor Hendricks fit? Collins and Kessler, that is too many bodies to squeeze into those 2 spots. And that opens up a gigantic hole at the 3. But that's possible. What if they use more Jordan Clarkson than Collin Sexton? I think they'll go with at least equal, but probably leaning more Sexton. Younger, played better. But they might not. And then what about these rookies? Like, what happens with Cody Williams? What happens with Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski? We can even throw Hendricks and Sensabaugh in there, who didn't play a huge amount as first-year players, but now they're second-year guys. Do they push them in January? Is it March? Like, that could just mix everything up. How bad do the fake injuries start piling on, and how quickly does that happen? All that stuff is definitely possible with so many of these players on the Jazz, because we know that there are incentives for them to be bad. We know all that stuff on this team. I said there about Markkanen moving to power forward. Let's just dig into Lauri Markkanen a little bit now. He's 27. He signed the contract. He cannot be traded. He had 24 usage only last season. That is low for a guy of his ability. He averaged 23 points on 24 usage, which is crazy, honestly. 8 rebounds, over 3 threes. He's never going to be assist, steals, or blocks guy. We know that. He didn't even hit 3.5 combined of those. That's not quite the Ryan Anderson, but it's not far off. The Ryan Anderson is 2 combined assist, steals, and blocks. So he's not quite there. 48 from the field, 90 from the line. They're all excellent. They're all really strong numbers. But the problem with Markkanen is, like, the ADP is 32. He's ranked 27 on Yahoo. ESPN's got him ranked 33, which is all that early 3rd round, and you probably look at him maybe as a late 2nd round producer, but is he going to be there in the playoffs? I would say, I'd say we've got 10% chance, honestly, of him playing through fantasy playoffs. In a roto league, doesn't matter. You get his games in, you're good. You get him in the 3rd round, we're okay. In a head-to-head league, I don't unless I'm getting him in the 40s in a draft or 50s, where there's enough upside in that spot, what's the point? The other part of that is for Markkanen is, what if Sexton is traded? What if Clarkson is traded? Because that usage is so low for Lauri. What if he becomes a 28 usage guy? Now, part of the problem, I think, with Lauri also, in terms of hitting that upside, is that he's been passive in fourth quarters for a long period of time, and he just sort of doesn't demand the ball as much as high usage guys do. So doing this on low usage is great. Not that 24 is low usage, but it sort of is low usage. But can he ever get to 28? I actually don't think so. He's a finisher, nickname pun not intended. He's not an initiator necessarily. He can't really create for others. He can get some of his own shot, but that's not all about what he does, and it's not the main part of what Lauri Markkanen goes out there and does. So while he's very good, and we can see that there's potential room here for this to improve, it might not. And now we take Keyonte George under the lens, because he is an interesting player. There was so much buzz regarding Keyonte George last season in training camp about him being the best point guard there. And then they opened the season with bloody Taylor Horton Tucker. And then you watch it and you went, no way. There's no way this is holding. He is dreadful and George is going to take over. And George did take over about 9 games in and then hurt his ankle. And then took a long time to get back into the spot where he needed to be. And now Horton Tucker's gone. He's in Chicago for whatever reason. He's there. Cool. Good for him. And George is going to start, and you would think big minutes immediately. So you can see on this part here, on this graph from Crafted, where it says his offensive role was a secondary ball handler. I think that has to change this season. He's got to become more of a primary ball handler. You can see his shooting numbers are okay, but they're not awesome. His three-point attempt rate is okay. His free throw attempt rate is okay. His creation number is really big. His passer rating is solid, even though the assists aren't super high. His load is pretty big for a rookie. And that means that there was a lot put on his plate. And did he succeed at it from a stats perspective? Not really. But getting that into a young player and not being absolutely dreadful all the time is a positive. On the defensive side, he's really bad. Really bad. Deflections, incredibly low. That's not a good sign considering how bad his steal numbers were. He's never going to block shots. We know that. His defensive versatility is bad. His crafted defensive plus-minus is tiny. It's really bad. He's defensive similarities Sadiq Bey, and that's not good. His overall similarity was Vasa Misic, and I don't love that. And Malachi Flynn, I don't love that. But what is really interesting is we've got a little bit of a different graph there on the side, which comes from dunks and threes. It's showing the percentage of what shots are assisted, and 70% of Keyonte George's three-point attempts were assisted. And you might say, wow, that's high. It's incredibly low. That's 10th percentile, meaning he's taking his three-point shots and his three-point shooting. You can see the volume of his three-point shots there and his shooting quality in that other graph. Is that he's doing this off pull-ups. No one else is really helping him get these shots. And even his mid-range or all of his shots assisted, only 52%. They are low numbers. As a rookie point guard on a team in flux that is bad, you can say, well, that means he's selfish. Not really. I don't think it does. I think it means that he was taking shots that were well above the level of skill that he had shown and the experience and age that he was at. And the results that came from that are relatively predictable, given the difficulty of what he's doing. Just pull up threes, pull up middies. He didn't get easy looks at the rim through layups from people passing him open. He had to do it all himself. And that is not a good thing for a rookie point guard. But maybe it's just a level of faith they have in him that can then bring us to more this year. Now, normally at this page in the under the lens, we look at the darker overall numbers, but they were bad, and I didn't want to put that in. What I wanted to show is that graph there shows his three-point percentage and how it improved over the season. Just steady improvement. Started off really bad. And in the end, towards the end of the year, we're talking like he's going at 35, 36% from three. Really what we want to see. This headshot plot from Basketball Index has two things. Unassisted rim field goal attempts per 75 possessions. That's the x-axis. The other one is passing creation volume, like how much you are creating and for others and opening things up. There are 4 players on this list. Fellow rookie point guard Scoot Henderson, Cade Cunningham, Jordan Poole, and Keyonte George. The reason that Cade and Poole are included in that, because when we talk about the fantasy shape of George, they're names that are going to come up. Maybe I should have done this in a different order. So, while I talk about the unassisted numbers from Keyonte George and say that this is a positive, that he had to do so much and it's understandable these numbers were low, that I have some concerns here, like when we compare him to like a Scoot, right? Even like though he wasn't really assisted and got open looks at the rim, Keyonte, Scoot got to the rim unassisted more. And Scoot's rim finishing numbers were pretty bad. And some of the criticisms of Scoot was, man, I thought he was more athletic than that. He still doubled the unassisted rim attempts per 75 of Keyonte George. Cade Cunningham, one of the criticisms of him is, man, this guy, maybe he's not athletic enough, he doesn't get to the rim. Well, he's sitting at over 5 rim field goal attempts. George is under 2. And even Jordan Poole, for all the Jordan Poole-ness, was better than George. Now, we also look at Jordan Poole's passing creation volume was really low. We go, maybe George did something more in that area. Well, Scoot and Cade both were way better than that. We expect Cade to be better than that, obviously. But Scoot was doing more creation as well. So while I'm giving you some things that I like George, and I do think there is value in him for this season, there are a few things there that just are somewhat concerning, I would say. So now I do show you this fantasy shape graph of Keyonte and the players that he's similar to: Scoot Henderson, Cade Cunningham, Jordan Poole was on that list, but the next two are, and this is where it gets really interesting, like Keyonte and Scoot, yeah, we get that. Cade, okay. James Harden, Damian Lillard. And you go, oh, okay, now that is interesting. Now, obviously, you can see the volume of these lines on this graph if you are watching it. These guys are doing stuff at way bigger volumes. George is a rookie and played 27 minutes. But that is elite first round-ish, second round-ish sort of stuff. From Harden, from Lillard. Cade's like a third round sort of guy, fourth round. Scoot obviously was bad as well. But the building blocks and the shape of the player are there. And to me, that's important. So I say all of this, and we talk about where Keyonte sits and his value, and there are some troubling signs of the low passing creation volume and the not, even though like a percentage of his shots at the rim were low and in terms of being assisted, he still didn't do much of it when he had the ball. That's again like we want you at the rim more, we want you taking more free throws. He took a ton of pull-up threes off the dribble. Why weren't they assisted? Like, there's numerous things that just give us pause of like, well, it's not just all roses, but it's not all doom and gloom based on the numbers from last season. And I think that's probably the major takeaway that I want you to get out of this, is there's multiple ways to look at it. The trajectory overall, though, is up, and I'm very interested in drafting him. Let's take a look at the Utah Jazz and their schedule now for this upcoming season. They've got 51 quality games, which is on the high side. They've got 15 back-to-backs, which is the second most. They've got 14 maximum weeks, which is also the second most. So schedule works pretty well in their favor. Their playoffs are also pretty good. They go 4-4-4 if you end the fantasy playoffs on March 23rd, like I suggest. If you finish on March the 30th, they're 4-4-3. Yahoo's default is 4-3-4, and then the ESPN default is 4-3-4-3. And again, we can see that all relatively clearly there. This is where we talk about the young players, the youth invasion, so to speak, and the guys under 23 using my Bazemore dynasty ranking metric, fully tuned to rebuilding. I've got 6 names we talk about. We've talked about Keyonte already. I've got him as a top 50 guy. I've got Taylor Hendricks as a top 75 dynasty player. I got Bryce Sensabaugh, who actually came out way higher than I expected, as a top 100 player. Okay. That's somewhat interesting, I would say, that Sensabaugh came out there. All these numbers have, I say, a level of grain of salt. There's got to be some sort of salt involved, but it's interesting. Then we get to the rookies from this year. Isaiah Collier, projected out as top 125. I think we will get Collier starting some games this season. I think he can work next to George. He's 6'3" point guard. He averaged 16 points with over 4 assists and 1.5 steals in college. He's a bad free throw guy and I think a bad three-point shooter. But 49 from the field, he had decent enough finishing numbers and really strong free throw volume and rim attempts, which obviously we just talked about Keyonte not really doing. So he's just a name to watch, and even though he slid significantly in the draft down to pick 29 for whatever reason, whether that was off-court, on-court, the shooting worries, any of those things it could have been, I'm not giving up on him just yet, and I want to see what we get, even if I don't know how much of that we get. Initially, we might not get huge amounts of Isaiah Collier. But then we have their number 10 overall pick, Cody Williams, who my worry with him, he's 20, he's 6'7", played 28 minutes a night, only 21 usage in college, 12 points a game, 3 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 0.6 steals. He shot 55, but only 71 from the line, and the three-point shooting numbers were a bit all over the place. And we also saw it in Summer League. He was invisible in some games, and in some games he really ramped it up. I love that he ramped it up, but he didn't do it enough. Now, if they do decide to play Markkanen at 4, then Williams will probably be the 3. But I also think, as a rookie, think DeAndre Hunter as a player that is out there and you go, what do you do here? And that's where my worries on Cody are, especially as a young player. I don't see him being able to assert himself whatsoever. Now, I've got his dynasty ranking for Bazemore sitting as top 150. That's looking at a 3, 4 year, 5 year advanced window. That's where I sit with him. The other one is Kyle Filipowski, who I thought had honestly a shot of a top 15 player in this draft. And this draft is obviously weird and terrible and flat. Him falling to 32 was pretty crazy to me. I still have him as a top 150 guy, Filipowski, but Kessler, Collins, Markkanen, they brought in another white center. You got to have as many white centers as possible. On Utah, they brought in Drew Eubanks. So Filipowski probably doesn't play much, but the short wingspan's a problem. But he blocks shots, he shoots, he passes, he can score, he can rebound. He's got I know the white-on-white comparison, but a Kelly Olynyk type of fantasy game. Actually, I haven't done the fantasy shape graph with Filipowski. Maybe I'll do that now. I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but I've got the numbers here. He projected similar to Jonathan Mobo, second-round pick from the Raptors. Then Rashawn Holmes, Chris Boucher, that makes sense, actually. Khalil Ware, Christian Wood, that makes sense, actually, as well. Daniel Tice as the next best one there. So that's where the shape for Filipowski sat for this upcoming season. With his fantasy skill set. But the fact that he fell in the draft was a little confusing to me at the time, and probably even more so confusing now when we look back on it. Now, let's take a look at risk-reward. I'm probably going to stop explaining this in a sec, but I did more work on upside-downside statistical variance of players and best and worst-case scenarios. And I just want to go through this and be able to see who I think is one of the higher variance guys, not including a variance in minutes or in games played. And Collin Sexton came out as that guy. We've talked about him already, and he's got the minutes variability too. But his variance was like 82 spots in category leagues based on the stats that he puts up and their inherent variance. And that was about 5.5 fantasy points per game. So when we're looking at him, and I do think he's still a value, but there's minutes variance, there's categorical variance, there's fantasy points variance. Which is not probably the combination of things that you love necessarily. Maybe you do love it. I don't know. I'm not telling you what you love. Love whatever you want. Who's old? Me, but who else is old? On the Jazz, more importantly. Well, there's 2 guys who sit in that over-the-hill phase, which is over the age of 29. So they are obviously a rebuilding team. One of them is Jordan Clarkson, who we spoke about already. And he's at age 32 and could very easily see fewer minutes and become even worse than he was. And they signed Patty Mills. I don't know why. We love Patty Mills for his contribution to Australian basketball. But he's been a bad NBA player for a while now. He's 36. He averaged 4 points a game. He played 13 minutes a night last season. He shot 35 from the field. Didn't miss a single free throw. But the other numbers are all putrid. Surely he's just there as a mentor-ish guy for George, for Collier, Sensabaugh, whoever it is. Just a locker room sort of a presence. But he's on this team. So I did want to go in and just give him a quick mention. Other guys on this team, guys like Svi Mihailuk, who just watch if there are trades. He's an interesting three-point shooter and had a few interesting moments over the past couple of years in Charlotte and in Boston. I'll put Svi's numbers up on the screen there so you can see them. Over the last season, he only played 10 minutes a night, 4 points a game, shot 42. He's got some passing ability. It's just they signed him for a multi-year deal, which I didn't fully understand, but that's okay. Who else is on this roster? Johnny Juzang, Micah Potter, Jason Prestone, and Oscar Tshiebwe comes across on a 2-way deal as well. That's the Utah Jazz. That's the season previewed from a fantasy perspective. We'll go through it again. Markkanen, fine in the 3rd round. Huge risk in head-to-head leagues. Collin Sexton, undervalued. Probably an 8th or 7th round guy, maybe, who you can probably push a little bit later, but risk. Walker Kessler, I think he's probably top 100. But I don't think there's much room for that to go wrong. But that's about where he is, and that could go higher. John Collins, I think, is being overrated. Because even if he does start early, I do not see that holding. I like Taylor Hendricks late. I like Keyonte George late. But there are concerns with George. Does he ever get the assists high enough? Does he just become an empty low percentage scorer? Possible. Where does Sensabaugh and Williams and those guys and Collier fit in? Williams probably has a chance to get more minutes, but he needs so many things to go right, I think, for him to be considered a great fantasy option, and I don't think that's going to be the case for him at least this season. So hit the thumbs up, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. We've got Toronto tomorrow. Oh my God, Toronto. We're doing the Raptors tomorrow. Absolutely strap in. We are here and ready to go, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.